I would like to revisit why I got so excited when you dropped that phrase, Paul. And I often feel like I'm sort of the skunk at the garden party when I show up at these conversations, TLC. It's usually about some religious topic, and I'm, trying to keep up and show interest and be polite. And um,
You don't
obviously,
want to see your fancy church, Paul.
I thought it was beautiful. Like I spent 10 days in Paris years and years ago. It was my first trip to Paris years ago. And I'm like, if I lived in Paris, I'd be in church every Sunday. Like it was just, I just went to every church I could get to and all the museums. I just loved it. Absolutely stunningly beautiful. Um, but and in all the marriage conversations, I've been in a bunch of those, and I would be the guy saying, "Hey, look, I love marriage, but I think it's in trouble," right? And that was kind of, to summarize, that was my, I was trying to be a kind of gentle skeptic, but supportive of like we gotta come up with something here, right? And the so the concept of universal basic income is an acknowledgement that there are threats to the basic survival of lots of people because of all the developments we're talking about, right? AI being the most, salient. And so you acknowledge that, like, uh-oh, that there are forces at work that are undermining the value of traditional work, and we can't just let people have nothing to do. So that's a proposed answer. And Paul, I 100% endorse your take on that. Probably not going to go the way you think. Besides being highly inflationary and all sorts of other things. What do you do about real estate? It's not fungible. What do you do? You just reset zero. It's like, so okay, now what do you do? Rents immediately go up by $1,000 a month or whatever. So but the point is there's an implicit acknowledgement that we need this, and there are larger forces at work that are threatening, just a basic income. And so this is a proposed solution to that. And then you come along with universal basic institutions. And of course, I immediately, in my brain, frame it the same way, which is there are forces at work, they're larger than any of us, that are eating away at the foundations of so many of the institutions that we have come to rely on for the society that we all love, and benefit from. And therefore, we need to have some kind of an answer for that. And I've kind of started thinking about churches almost as like civilization builders or sustainers, I think many churches might be well served to think of themselves that way if they don't. I will often say I'm not as interested in the doctrinal distinctions, but I am interested in the function that the church has served in community, in the glue that holds a community together, right? My mythical medieval village that I'm, pining for. So, but in order to have that conversation, you kind of need to get to the heart of why so many of these institutions are losing faith with the people who they're supposedly trying to help. And you started with a little bit of that when you talked about corruption and trying to deal with that, but it's also just rent seeking. It's also just the status that you gain by being involved. Like, you go to Yale and now you can say that for the rest of your life. There's all these non-monetary advantages. You elbow your way to the front of the room and you get into, get on that committee, or you get to influence policy. And the people doing that, they're convinced that they're doing the Lord's work, right? They're in many cases they're not what we would call corrupt or whatever, where they're overtly thinking that they're somehow taking advantage of the system for their own gain, at least
They're
not
true believers.
self-consciously.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so probably the three of us would get lots of agreement, maybe not on every single point, but on most points, that the institutions are also failing us in all kinds of ways. So I would almost argue that the threats that we're all seeing and acknowledging are in some ways, hastening a kind of, deconstruction that at some level is kind of deserved, right? In the music world, everybody's worried about Suno and AI and what it's going to do to creatives. And I'm like, well, I mean, it goes all the way back to pop music. It goes all the way back to here. I know the formula. Get to the chorus in the first 30 seconds and these three chord progressions. And we know what you want. We're going to get even more of it and harder, right? And the whole industry is built around the song, right? You got to get the hit song, right? And the cynicism that's underneath that, the abstraction away from the sheer love of the art of it, right, is you've already embedded in it the thing that's going to make you susceptible when you turn on the radio and you can't tell whether it's AI or not, right? And so you sort of deserve what happens to you at some level, right? because you don't actually believe in what you claim you believe, right? So the, the you know the that to me is so much more. I don't have a solution to that, by the way, but that to me is so much richer as a question, right? It's like from within the institution, the ethos to perpetuate it at all costs, and what that has cost its relevance to modern life. So many institutions, the reason why they're losing relevance is because they have ceased to be relevant, right? They have become overtaken by rent seekers. They've been there many decisions have been made. That's what the secrecy in the church was, right? It's like, well, we can't let this get out because it's going to damage the reputation of the institution and so forth. And you pointed to the conversation this morning, Paul, on Luke's stream, uh, also talking about just the ways that institutions are no longer, the technological component to that, right? Where you have options. If you have an unpleasant experience, you just take your business elsewhere, right? Um, so, in a sense, that's such a big conversation that we could be chasing rabbits down trails for the rest of our conversation. But particularly since you both are devout religious men, and I think the church is such a critical um, civilization builder, it seems that at least I need to bring that up, right? Because that's what I was thinking when you said that. It's like, okay, do we agree that there is such a thing as a universal basic institution? Do we agree on that? Um, it, it, do we agree that there is at least such a thing, even if we can't point to one that we all agree is one, say, right? Just do we agree at a conceptual level, right? Because of course that goes back to where I started with you, Paul, which is UPVK, which is that as soon as you said, without individuals and without institutions, I thought, yes, right? Like, and whatever it is I've devoted my life to, how many of them end up as institutions? Well, who knows? Depends on how you're going to use the definition, right? How many of them, live beyond my lifetime, for example, or whatever, right? Or is there a budget amount? If it's over a certain budget, is that now an institution? It depends on how you're going to evaluate that. But I have been basically devoting my life to finding ways to build organizations, start them and build them to address what seemed like obvious needs to me within various communities, various projects, right? And it's kind of like I got on the marriage conversation. Hey, I love marriage. I think we're in trouble. It's not like I don't love institutions. I actually would challenge Luke on all institutions are inherently demonic. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not so sure about that, right? I actually have some quibbles with that position. But I do see the critique, right? So anyway, I've said a lot. I'll stop.